Airbnb's been used like 2.5 billion times. I mean, every time the company doubles or triples in size, you almost have to rebuild the company. Our core business could be easily 2-3 times bigger, and we did $80 billion in bookings last year.
It's a big thing in France.
And this is the second biggest country in the world for Airbnb. People spend as much money on Airbnb as the LVMH group.
Or is it compared to the big hotel companies like Accor or...
It's much larger than any hotel chain. Why are prices in Paris for hotels up 70%? It's because there's scarcity. And we thought, well, what if you could provide every type of service, offer in a hotel and more?
It's kind of a super app. There's endless possibilities.
Where we're going to go is to basically build kind of like the equivalent of a social network in the real world. And so the question is, how much of that market can we get?
Are your co-founders still around?
They're both on the board. We basically have a standing weekly call. We've been doing that almost every single week since we started the company. There's a lesson there, is to run a big company the way you run a small company. After 2 billion guest arrivals, I've been asked, what have I learned about this?
87%, c'est la stat de ma boule qu'on vient de découvrir. C'est le pourcentage de personnes qui regardent ces vidéos sur YouTube et qui n'est pas abonné. Si vous tombez sur ce contenu pour la première fois, vous avez le droit de rester comme ça. Mais si ça fait plusieurs fois que vous tombez sur ce contenu, que vous nous kiffez, vous aimez ce qu'on fait, rendez-moi ce petit service. C'est un clic. Nous, on va s'arracher pour avoir de meilleurs invités. 100 000 abonnés. Qu'est-ce qu'on fait pour 100 000 abonnés? Après, on ira à 500. Après, on ira au million. Chaque chose en son temps. Alors, on fait quoi pour les 100 000?
So yeah, I was saying 8 years. And I was like, 8 years ago, the idea was just to chat with, French dudes, entrepreneurs, and just try to understand how they grew. And I was already looking at Airbnb, and actually, you're a bit younger than I am, and I was like very impressed, and I'm so happy to have you here.
Well, I'm so excited to be here.
Really. I mean, it's something. It's an achievement for me. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it is. It is. What you've done, mate. Wow, 16 years?
Yeah, it's actually almost 17, over 17 years. Yeah, we, first weekend, the first idea was like late 2007, but really got going in 2008. So I never thought I've spent like the majority of my working life doing this, and I never thought I would do anything this long.
Have you ever been bored?
No, it's like every day. I'm not bored because like every day is like pretty unexpected. And the moment you become a little bit bored is the moment you get like a little complacent, is the moment like a new problem emerges. And so you're almost like not allowed to become bored because the environment is so dynamic. And the company has like been growing so quickly, but then as you grow really quickly, all your systems stop scaling, and you almost like, every time the company doubles or triples in size, you almost have to rebuild the company, because it's like an engine. You build it for one size, then you grow, and you have to rebuild it. And that doesn't include the fact that like the world changes, new problems merge, people use your product for reasons you weren't intending for, you have to adapt. And then the technology industry is like so dynamic.
Dynamic.
As we know, and there's like new paradigms like quite frequently. And when I started Airbnb, like the iPhone had just come out and mobile was fairly disruptive. And now obviously with AI, like it's like obviously the most disruptive technology in a lifetime. So like that just accelerates everything again. And so just the moment you're getting comfortable, the moment you get in your groove, something gets you out of your groove. And I think that's
like a virus or...
And I think that's something like really great though, because I think like your growth often happens out of your comfort zone. And so you're constantly being pushed out of your comfort zone, constantly growing to adapt. You grow as an adaptation to a challenge that emerges, to a change. And startups are like always changing, always adapting. They're not stagnant at all, obviously. And also we're trying to do new things. And so every time you do new things, you kind of step back into your past, like back into kind of being a startup again,
Plus you have, so many things to deal with. For you guys, I was talking about a virus that came around, but the legal environment everywhere for you, which is kind of weird because it's kind of the success, right? That made it. I don't know how, if you did see it coming or it seems sometimes you're like, these guys, this dude is like really literally raising prices on real estate in Paris. And at the end, I mean, well, it's a good thing, you know. I mean, probably for us, for me at some point, and for many people, but for Airbnb also, it's not that bad. But all of those things are things you have to deal with day after day after day after day in a new country, in another country, and it must be very, tough.
Well, the business, like the complexity scales kind of linearly with the growth of the company.
Linearly.
And, it like literally grows, or maybe even in compounds. But actually, it's probably more than linear because like there's relationships between different cities. But Airbnb is in over 100,000 towns and cities around the world. It turns out that every city is kind of its own ecosystem with its own dynamics and often its own laws. And so it's not like there's this global like regulatory body regulating housing. There's often not even national bodies regulating housing or provincial bodies. It's usually cities. And so every city is different. And I remember when we started Airbnb, like I thought, okay, we'll like create a model in a city. And if we can create that model, we literally called it model city. Like we can create a model in a city. And if one city's happy and it works, we can show all the other cities. And we would try to do something in a city and we'd show another city and the city's like, well, we're not them. We're different. And you go to every city and they're like, we're different. So you have to do something different in every single city. In every city we go to, we essentially just try to tell our story and we try to be like really good partners. And the way you do that is, you know, when I started Airbnb, I thought if somebody had an issue with you, you should avoid them. If people don't like you, you should like avoid them, because to not avoid them and talk to them would to create conflict, and conflict could escalate. And one of my first leaders, my first executive I ever hired, her name was Belinda Johnson, and she was this great executive. And she used to tell me, if people don't like you, you should meet with them. You should listen to them. It's hard to hate people up close. You should look across the table from them, which, by the way, is like kind of like the whole premise of Airbnb. It's kind of hard to hate somebody up close, and you understand one another when you listen. And so part of being a great partner was we go to cities, we listen to their questions, listen to their challenges.
Like to the mayor or to
the mayor, city council members, like, you know, of course you'd also meet your like stakeholders, like your host, and then you'd tell them your story, like why you started the company, what you're trying to do. You would often dispel like misconceptions about the company. Like, you know, like we say, there's a lot of misconceptions that the vast majority of people on Airbnb are renting like professionally managed property owners that are managing like, you know, rentals that only exist to be rented Airbnb. Here in France, 70% of the homes are like either rooms or they're primary homes that somebody lives in somewhere all the time. And the demographics are typically like regular people. And so you tell that story. You tell them the story of how the company founded. The company was actually founded not to make housing more expensive, but to make housing more affordable for us. Because, you know, when I started Airbnb with my roommate, we couldn't afford to pay our own rent. I remember we had like I had $1,000 at the bank, and we had like a rent check due, and it was $1,150. And so we had this math problem, like many people, which is we can't afford to pay our rent. It's a very relatable story. And a design conference is coming to San Francisco. All the hotels in San Francisco were sold out. We had this idea, well, what if we turned our house into a bed and breakfast for the design conference? Unfortunately, I didn't have any beds, but Joe had 3 airbeds. We pulled them out of the closet. We called it Airbed and Breakfast. By the way, the amount of times I've told that story, I didn't think I'd be telling that story over and over again. But telling that story to policymakers and city officials is important because to some extent, people want to know where you're coming from. They want to know at some level, who are you? What are your values? Why do you even do this? And we tell our story that we were ordinary guys and we built a platform for mostly regular people to do it like us. But of course, as Airbnb grew, all those unintended consequences, and some were really good and some were like not great. And it really depends on the city. And you can't even paint a broad brushstroke. If you build a platform, a tool, and like 100 million people use it or hundreds of millions of people use it, your technology, your platform is always going to be used for reasons you can't intend, because you can't possibly have the imagination to anticipate every way someone's going to use your product. And so the question is, what do you do when that happens? Are you responsive, or do you put your head in the sand? Do you adapt? And we try to adapt. Like when we first started Airbnb, people said, oh, but you're not paying taxes. And I remember first thinking, oh, well, we have to pay like hotel tax. Like, what is that? And we had to learn about this. Today, we've collected more than $13 billion of hotel or transit occupancy tax around the world. People said, well, Airbnbs are, taking housing off the market. So we worked with cities and we established registration systems. And the registration systems would often try to make sure that the person was a permanent resident of the country or the city. Maybe they were renting their primary home or a secondary home. They may limit the amount of nights a year you could rent. And so we'd work with them and they'd establish that system. Then people said, well, we don't like neighborhoods being disrupted. So we essentially worked really hard to ban bad guests. We had a neighborhood hotline. If hosts were being negligent, we'd remove them from the platform. And then people said, well, what happens when my home gets trashed? And then you'd say, well, when we basically created a guarantee, which essentially protects your home up to $3 million of property damage. So the basic idea for all these things is you kind of build this lightweight solution. You get to product market fit, you scale, but as you scale, you run into all these different problems. And as you're running all these different problems, each step of the way, you're trying to now create a new solution. In the moment you solve a new problem, maybe you get to a different scale where something else emerges that you weren't anticipating, and you try to solve that problem as well. And as long as you're like constantly leaning in, constantly in solution mode, constantly trying to improve yourself, that's we think a really, really good path.
Very interesting. I was about to ask actually if you had ways to prevent all of these problems, and actually it seems you do.
Yeah, we built this like AI-powered reservation screening technology. So like Airbnb's been used like 2.5 billion times. You can look at the data and the patterns, and a human may not, with their eye, be able to detect if somebody is about to do something fairly nefarious. But you can see all the subtle patterns from the last like billion times something happened. And you can use that to flag if activity is suspicious. I mean, this is essentially the theory behind fraud detection, right? Fraud detection, like there can be, a system trips something up. It either stops something or elevates to a human review. This is basically the whole theory of fraud. And we can use that theory of fraud detection or trust and safety issue detection to our platform. And I think the bigger Airbnb gets, the safer it gets, the more secure it gets, the less risky it gets. And even, but the bigger you get, the more problems there are, just like because the base is bigger. So even if you get safer every year and you get more reliable every year, if you just grow fast enough, you're going to hear about more issues every year because just the company is so big. And so you always have to push against that.
I have so many questions about all of you just said, but actually I normally have one question for my guest before we start everything. Can you introduce yourself, Brian?
Oh, yes. Yeah, my name is Brian Chesky. I'm co-founder and CEO of Airbnb. Yes.
That's good.
Yeah, and
you love dogs.
I love dogs. I grew up with dogs. I kind of have two golden retrievers. I have a golden retriever, and then my parents have a golden retriever, but the golden retriever likes to be with my golden retriever, so they both stay at my house.
Yeah, so it wasn't clear to me on your Instagram account.
So I kind of have two golden retrievers now.
But one is
one is officially mine, but I'm not sure what the difference is at this point. Okay.
Do you have a preference? Do you like yours more than the other one?
Well, I hope they're not listening. Definitely no preference. Yeah, they're incredible. They're adorable, and I work so much that it's just great to have like a companion, especially when you're at your house, and like I get to make the rules for like our office policy, and I'm like, oh, it's dog friendly, and like my dog like comes up and hangs out in the office mostly when I'm eating, to be honest. She's like sitting next to me, and then she like bounces when I'm done eating. But yeah, they're incredible. It's a funny stat, by the way. I heard in the city of San Francisco, I don't know if this is true, but there's more dogs than there are children in the city of San Francisco. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's true. It's partly because there's a lot of dogs and a lot of dog parks, partly because a lot of people don't have children, but it's a very dog-friendly city.
I host this podcast that's called Génération, do it yourself, and I have a second one that's called La Martingale. La Martingale in French means it's a way to win at the casino every time. It's kind of a strategy.
Yeah.
So it's a chimera, as we would say. It doesn't exist really, right? And I've recorded several episodes about Airbnb strategy on La Martingale. So because it's a big thing in France, obviously Airbnb, it's big. So
And this is the second biggest country in the world for Airbnb.
And for a long time, Paris was the number one city.
Yeah, and I think it perhaps still is. And we have 120,000 homes, and just started cut in, but just like a couple of really interesting stats. I think Host last year earned around like $8 billion in France on Airbnb.
Oh, wow.
And the Olympics is probably like the craziest stat of all. Obviously, the Olympics came here in Paris last summer, and 700,000 guests stayed in Airbnbs during the Olympics in Paris.
700,000.
700,000. And we now have 120,000 homes. So it's pretty wild. Like, it's a very important. And I think France is the number one country in the world by like market penetration. So if you kind of control for population.
I was about to ask a question after, so about the Olympics, but with the La Martingale, one of the guys I loved actually told me something. I don't know if you know that, but he said one of the secrets, at least in Paris, to get a better occupancy rate, you say, yeah, is to be dog and animal friendly.
Yeah, oh yeah, of course.
I mean, he says
it makes complete sense, right?
Yeah.
The more people you accommodate that are searching for your site, the more bookings you're going to get.
Yeah, it says like everybody puts no on this question automatically, and if you put yes, you get like much more rental and much higher price.
There's a lot of like interesting hacks. That's one. The other really interesting hack, maybe I'll give 3. One is accepting dogs and
10.
pets.
I love those hacks. Yeah.
A second one is like just, this kind of sounds obvious, but really good photos.
Yeah,
I think that like it's such a worthwhile investment to take great photos, and the cost of photos, which is like, you can take photos yourself, but like we have an Airbnb service where you can hit a button and a professional photographer comes to your like neighborhood and like your home and will photograph, and you can do it for like under $200, and it will more than pay for itself like almost every single time, because it's a sight unseen purchase. So you get to like see what you're like you think about it, like it's a really big unknown purchase. You're taking a huge leap of faith to go off into a different country, to maybe a city you've never been to a stranger's home, maybe with your family on your hard-earned vacation. And if it doesn't go well, it can be very difficult and inconvenient to find a different place to stay. So photos are really important. The other hack or trick...
Sorry, but this one you invented it.
Yeah.
And it was a great inspiration to us. I've sold the company like literally millions thanks to your ID.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because
cool.
we started this company. It's called Ocus now, and we've sent photographers all around the world. So at some point we were shooting. I think it was to you it's not that much, but to us it was big. 700 photo shootings a day, and
that's a lot.
And we were shooting everywhere. And I was selling to real estate big companies in France like Orpi, and well, you don't know them, but and I was telling them that they would sell faster if they had better pictures, and it worked. We proved it, as you did, and thank you. Actually, I didn't expect to thank you for that, but you made me rich somehow.
Well, you know, our photography service was one of the first on-demand services. It actually predated Uber. Uber started in 2010. We developed a photography service, I think, in 2009. It actually started in 2009 when we entered Y Combinator, and we noticed back then. I mean, now like the cameras on phones are really high quality, and you can take a photo on your camera on your phone, seamlessly upload it to Airbnb. We'll even like help process and crop the photo, and you can resort the photo. So it's a somewhat solved problem. But back then, like 15, 16 years ago, a camera phone was really poor quality. The camera on your iPhone was not a photo that was high quality. It was grainy. It was dark. And so the question is, you had to basically like first of all, you had to have access to a professional camera, a DSLR camera. It could cost like $500 to $1,000. So first of all, most people don't have those cameras. If you took the photo, you would then have to process the photos. You'd have to crop them. They were too high res. You had to like scale down the photo. And then you had to like essentially take the photo off the camera, put it on a hard drive, either an external hard drive on your computer's hard drive. Then you had to manually upload all the photos. It was all really, really difficult. And I remember I was thinking, what if you can magically hit a button, a professional photographer would come to your house, photograph your home, and then we would upload the photos to your home.
24 hours.
24 hours.
Boom.
And we did this in 2009, but you know who the professional photographers were? My co-founder and I, because we had 3 employees and we had like basically no budget. So when you knocked, we would knock on the door, they'd open the door and like, we're the professional photographers here. Oh, but we're also the co-founder. And people are like, oh, wow, you're like a really small company. So professional photos make a big difference. The last hack is, and this is, I think also when you hear it, an obvious one, is discount your property until you get reviews. Because reviews are a currency. They make your property more valuable. But a lot of properties have a little bit of a cold start problem. No, they don't have any reviews. So you got to incentivize a traveler to take a chance. And so if you discount your property and get some good reviews, and if you lower the price of your property, the expectations are lower, so you're more likely to get a good review. And then now the property is more valuable, the listing is more valuable, and it will more than pay for itself. So those are like some like very, very obvious hacks, like great photos, low prices, accept every type of guest, and you're going to get a lot more business.
Did the average standard raise a lot since you started? I mean,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple dynamics there. One is just general price appreciation, like the equivalent of inflation, like housing costs are higher. All costs have risen. Airbnbs are in higher demand. In high demand markets where there's less supply, prices will go up. But also, there's a couple other dynamics, like the mix shift is different. We have higher income people using Airbnb. Like when we started Airbnb, I was 26. And it was kind of a site for other people that were like in their 20s. People in their 20s don't have as much money as people in their 40s typically. And so, we had like kids out of college typically that were like kind of more entry-level jobs, working with entry-level salaries. And over time, they became higher income. So we kind of grew with the audience. They were more likely to have families. They would need more space. The mix shift completely changed. And we kind of moved up market. And we moved up market and grew as our core audience of millennials aged in demographic and started earning more money. And of course, we still have the next generation, but it went mainstream. And as it went mainstream, we started getting more and more of the hotel traveling public that were already used to paying really high rates. And the interesting thing is like hotels have gone up a lot in price. I think in France, I heard since I don't know if it was like since 2021, the prices in Paris have gone up in hotels more than 70%. So the hotel prices are rising very, very quickly. And part of the reason is it's a problem of scarcity. In fact, there's a reason hotels are expensive and housing is expensive, and it's just there's not enough homes being built. There's not enough maybe hotels being built. And as demand increases faster than supply, of course, prices go up. It's also contributed to a little bit of travel redistribution. Airbnb is growing fastest in small towns, small cities, villages, and rural communities. There's all sorts of reasons why. Maybe people are discovering these communities, but also it's typically a more affordable place to travel. So there's something really interesting where travel gets redistributed as well.
How high did it go? Can you rent like a mansion in the Hamptons on Airbnb?
Yeah, you can. We used to have the tagline, the Airbnb is a way to rent anything from a couch to a castle. You can rent a space in a living room. That's kind of like where the Airbnb started, a guest bedroom, to an entire home or apartment, to now like entire, like obviously castles and villas. And we have so many castles on Airbnb. We created a category of castles. We had to create a filter for them to filter for all the castles. So, Airbnbs now are at a luxe price point. You can get Airbnbs for tens of thousands of dollars a night. It's one of the only brands.
Tens of thousands a night.
Yes, you can get a room for like $40 a night. You can get a room for tens of thousands of dollars a night. Or a home for tens of thousands of dollars. It's one of the only brands in the world where, like it cuts across all price points, right? You've got luxury brands, you got budget brands, you got mid-level brands. Airbnb knows no boundaries. In fact, it's one of the like broadest demographics in the world from a use case standpoint. For example, it's all price points, as we just said, from budget to super luxe. It's also a brand for families, but it's a brand for young people. It's a brand for solo travelers. It's a brand for retirees. It's an urban brand, but it's also a rural brand. But it is also, a global brand. Like there's a lot of brands that are popular in France, the brands that are European, brands that are Asian, brands that are American. It's kind of, and you might ask like, well, why is this? Is it to something to do with the way we do marketing? And a little bit of that. The bigger reason is we're a global travel network, and it's a network effect business. And so the more people come on the platform, the network gets more valuable, and people want to be all on the same network because they want as much choice as possible. But then the platform's currency is trust, and trust requires like history. It requires a density of activity and experiences. Also, Airbnb is one of the platforms where people are actually willing to be on the same platform as people different from them. And it's actually cool and a perk. I'll give you an example. I remember in the early days, like Facebook, the core Facebook app was really popular, obviously, for students and young people. And it was cool until people's parents came on the platform.
Yeah, sure.
And the moment people's parents get on the platform, they leave. In Airbnb, it's actually like a perk. You have like hosts that are typically older than the guests because they're more likely to be homeowners. Mm-hmm. And young guests, I'm sure they like staying with young hosts, but they also like staying with older hosts.
Have you ever been afraid that would happen on Airbnb?
Oh, of things happening?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm always very concerned. And, I'm always concerned. And trust and safety is like,
no, but what I was saying is that younger people would think it's a boomer platform, like it's for old people.
I never really
like
worried
Facebook.
about that, and pretty early on, we saw this phenomenon where like, because it kind of started for as a platform for young people. Very early on, people's parents and grandparents started coming onto Airbnb. And like they were, especially on the host side, people putting their homes up, and they had some of the best reviews. And the great thing about Airbnb is there's a kind of public record of almost all activity that's ever happened on Airbnb, because 2 out of 3 times somebody stays in Airbnb, they leave a review. So that means that 2 out of 3 Airbnb stays of all time, there's a public record, left on Airbnb, other than if the listing deactivates. But there's like hundreds of millions of reviews you can read, and we would read these reviews. I remember my co-founder Nate said, like, our co-founder Nate was the CTO and he's a technical co-founder. And when you're like a designer, my co-founder and I were designers, and we had the challenge of getting a technical co-founder to kind of build our dreams and visions, and they're constantly pitched, and you have to convince them to like build and work on what you're working on. And other than, I think, us being persuasive, we were fairly persuasive. Nate, our co-founder, said one of the things that really persuaded him was reading the reviews. And he basically went on the platform and read the reviews of people staying in Airbnbs, and it showed them that people love this product. And we were in a Combinator. Paul Graham said, make something people want. And it turns out we had this, system of trust, this review system where you could actually get, a kind of public indication of like if somebody really, really liked it. So to answer your question, we didn't really worry about like the different demographics coming together, because very early on, people from all walks of life kind of came to Airbnb, and they were all having great experiences. And we didn't see any correlation between younger people staying with older people and having bad experiences. In fact, it was almost more likely to be they having better experiences. What do people that are older have in common? They're probably a little more mature, a little more responsible. They are more likely to have been parents, so they are more likely to know how to like kind of take care of somebody. They're typically very hospitable, and so they make for great hosts.
Can you still rent just a room?
Yeah.
I can because I just see Airbnb as a place where you rent a flat. Like
it's
in
actually
Paris.
really interesting. If you're young, you might not have a recollection to how Airbnb started. But yeah, it started as people renting living rooms and bedrooms.
Yeah.
And you can still rent living rooms, you can still rent bedrooms, and there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of bedrooms. You just go to Airbnb, you click on the filter, you click on room, and you can get a room in a house.
Like my office in my place, I just could, there's a room like where my parents stay when they come in here in Paris. I could just rent it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think the idea of Airbnb, one of the ideas of Airbnb is that it is really meant to be only limited to your imagination.
Brian,
And
you tell me when you come back to in Paris. I'll rent you my office.
Exactly.
Do you stay in Paris? Do you stay in Airbnb? You have to.
Yeah, I'm staying one now. Yeah, it's awesome.
How big? I mean, do you take
It's
like
near the Eiffel
amazing?
Tower. I'm here for work, and I have other members of my team here. So we have a 4-bedroom apartment. It's a really nice one. And there's 3 other people staying in, obviously 3 other rooms. And we actually, this is really cool. I noticed when I got to the place 2 nights ago that there's this really cool living room. It's a pretty grand living room. And then behind it's a dining room. It's a dining room that's actually a circular dining room with a circular table. And there's like 8 or 9 seats around the table.
Right.
And I thought to myself, that could be really good to have a team, like a meal. We just launched services on Airbnb.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that, yeah.
And so I booked a chef on Airbnb who's coming tonight to make a dinner for, the team, and we're going to eat it in the dining room.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think when I think about when I hear you saying that, actually, it seems it's in your DNA. I mean, you started that with your how do you say, your friends in your own apartment, right? And now you're still going in your own apartment with your colleagues everywhere you go.
Yeah,
So you see everyone, each other in your pajamas or everything, or is it?
they mostly come out in the clothes they're going to wear. But yeah, all good if you want to hang your pajamas. I mean, actually, I was just with. We just did we can talk about this later, but we just did a announcement with the Tour de France, and one of the hosts is Mark Cavendish, a famous cycler, and he. He's got a wife, he's got 5 kids. But one of the things he told me, I hadn't really thought about this because I don't stay in hotels a lot. But he said, one of the reasons I love Airbnbs is because if I want to have breakfast, I don't have to shower and get dressed to go downstairs to the lobby to get breakfast. Yeah. I can just roll out of bed and just go to the kitchen like you do in your house. I mean, some people take a shower and then have breakfast. I'm kind of the person, I roll out of bed, eat breakfast, and then get ready for the day. The comfort of a home allows you to do that.
Plus, with your service, I don't know if you go that far, but maybe you can have a chef preparing your breakfast.
You could. I mean, that's actually going to be, I think that's going to be like a really popular use case because, I think people are going to definitely like have them come over for dinner, but like you can also go out to a restaurant. I think chefs will be very popular outside of cities for dinner because if you go to like a small town, there aren't a lot of restaurants and a chef could come over and prepare. I think they'll be very, very popular in like vacational destinations where you have a bunch of people staying, you want to stay around the house. I think in urban areas, people will book dinner, but they'll especially book breakfast. And the reason why is because like most people don't go out for breakfast because it eats up a bunch of time for your day and you wake up, you're hungry. And so I think a chef preparing breakfast in an Airbnb when you have a whole kitchen is a perfect use case.
Yeah, at least getting the groceries and stuff. Is that part of the service you make?
Grocery, the chefs will pick up like everything and do everything. So a chef, basically, you order what you want. They bring the ingredients. They cook it on site. They prepare it. They serve it. And then they clean up after themselves. So you don't really have to do anything. There's then we have a service which is prepared meals where they can prepare meals off site and bring them over to you. And you can put them in the fridge as an alternative to like Uber Eats or DoorDash. Grocery stocking is the service we want to launch. We don't yet have. But a lot of great hosts will essentially stock your house. Like, if you want eggs or you want coffee or tea or like bananas or fruit or whatever you want, you can stock it. And I think that's going to be really popular, especially because homes have kitchens. And
they sell it. I mean, you have to pay for it to get the eggs and the bananas.
Well, we don't offer it yet, but it would be something we'd allow you to book through the platform, and I think it'll be a very popular service.
And what about the chef? As I live in Paris, and if I'm not in an Airbnb, can I order a chef or an Airbnb?
Every Airbnb service and Airbnb experiences you can book in your own city. So if you live in Paris and you want a chef to come make you a meal, if you live in Paris and you want a massage in your house and you don't want to go to a spa, if you want to get ready for a big event and you want your hair, your makeup, your nails done, if you want a personal trainer, you can do all that in Airbnb in your own city. So you don't need to be staying at Airbnb. You don't need to be traveling. And this brings up
That's huge.
Yeah, well, you're right. And this brings up a larger point, which is we've launched 10 categories of services primarily marketed to travelers. But once locals discover services, and hopefully they'll discover them and like them, and then there's like dozens and dozens of categories, then I think it could really open up the platform. Because I think our platform for services solve a few big problems. The first problem it solves is this stuff is really hard to book typically. Airbnb, we made it easy to book something. Like before Airbnb, we didn't invent the idea of sleeping in a house, but we kind of invented the idea of booking it as easily as a hotel and being able to have like this really trusted review system. That was novel to Airbnb. So now you can book a chef and you literally just touch a button. If you want to get a chef today on Airbnb, like outside of Airbnb, first of all, it's hard to find. Second of all, it's really, really hard to book. You often have to like go onto WhatsApp, send a bunch of messages back and forth. There's not an easy way to book. You don't even know what you're buying. So it's really, really difficult.
You don't have reviews. You don't have
reviews. And then that brings up the biggest problem of all. How do you know if they're good?
Yeah.
And so a lot of these services are word of mouth, and the person arriving is kind of a mystery. You don't really know anything about them. And so we wanted to solve these problems. We really wanted to solve 3 problems of services. 1, it's easy to book. 2, everyone's vetted. You know they're great. You can read about them. 3, you can use one app all over the world. So if you're going to Tokyo, if you're going to Brazil, if you're staying in your own city in Paris, you can use the same app. And you can use the app for really eventually any kind of service. So that's kind of the idea. It's we're just trying to use it as a very adaptable platform.
It's kind of a super app. Somehow, I mean, it's what I'm saying. There's like endless possibilities.
I think there's endless possibilities, and there's a lot of precedents for this. Like in retail items, obviously Amazon's the iconic example. Started with books. Books took off, and I think initially I don't think anyone would have predicted Amazon would be the everything store. The next category they expanded to was DVDs and CDs when people used to buy those. Then they started selling electronics to play the DVDs and CDs. Then they got into toys, and then pretty soon they got into everything. And people say that Amazon is the everything store. You can get everything at Amazon. It's kind of not exactly right. It's the kind of everything in a cardboard box store. It's everything that you can ship in a cardboard box. But increasingly, the economy is shifting from goods to services. Mm-hmm. And so it's not like everything you buy is an item. Increasingly, people are buying services. And I think this is becoming more popular. And, obviously, I think, of course, when you travel, hotels have services. For every person who stays in Airbnb, about 9 people stay in a hotel, so they're way bigger. And one of the top reasons people say they stay in hotels is because hotels come with services. Mm. And we thought, well, what if you could provide every type of service offered in a hotel and more? Because if you're a hotel, you can't employ you're not going to employ a makeup artist in a hotel because there's probably not enough people that want makeup. But if you offer it to the entire city and it can be on demand and they don't need to be on the premise all the time, then you can have this long tail of services. So that is essentially like one of the ideas around services. And of course, we didn't design services for people to book in their own city, but it just so happens that it works just as well.
Yeah, I mean, like if you take a chef, I do use a chef like maybe 3 times a year at home for specific dinners, maybe business dinners or some specific dinners, but it's like very rare.
Right.
And so I would definitely do it on I was about to say Uber, but because I was thinking actually, would you, could I rent like a chauffeur, like a driver for a day?
Yeah, we don't offer that service yet, but like a driver.
Because if I just arrive on Charles de Gaulle in France at the airport and I want a driver for a week or for a couple of days,
the platform would work for that.
All right.
Just like Amazon's platform is built to sell a book, clothing, electronics, and house goods or kitchen goods or paper towels, and it's extensible platform. Airbnb is an extensible platform. And just like you can get a couch to a castle in every type of space, it's actually designed to eventually get kind of an endless number of services probably. I mean, there's going to be things that won't make sense to book on Airbnb. And most of the services are like kind of hospitality services, but that's a pretty big industry.
You could be like an API, and if I want like a, how do you call that, bungee jump castle,
Yeah.
in my, like I rent something for my son's birthday on Airbnb, and I want like to have a dream weekend.
Yeah.
You could maybe have some people just coming on your platform and offering things you don't even expect.
100%. And I mean, that's one of the whole ideas is you want to build a platform and you want people to use it in ways you didn't intend it to. And then most of those are going to be great. And then sometimes it won't be great and you have to adapt. But ultimately, like, you don't always want to completely predetermine how people are using your platform because you can't totally conceive all the applications. Like, for example, when we started Airbnb, we didn't even conceive of people renting their whole home. We thought this was a way to rent out a bedroom. And so we built a platform for bedrooms. And then one day, like, somebody wanted to rent their whole home. And we're like, wait a second. Our company was called Airbed and Breakfast, right? Because it was like
Airbeds.
Airbeds. Yeah. And I remember somebody wanted to rent their whole home. And we're like, wait a second. How can you do that? If you rent your whole home, you're not there. How will you make breakfast for them? And, and that was like a bit of a obstacle that we had to like work through. And we're like, okay, wait, that's kind of like a silly constraint. So let's lift that constraint. And then I remember thinking like other constraints, like, well, every home should like have electricity, right? Like that kind of be crazy to put up a space that doesn't have electricity. Shouldn't that be a policy? And then somebody wanted to rent a treehouse or an Airstream or a tent, a camping, like, or a yurt. And we're like, oh, maybe even that's like too limiting of a constraint. So you got to be really adaptable. I think many of the best technology platforms, they're platforms, and they're platforms for other people's ideas and other people's creativity. And you kind of have to have this balance of having a point of view of how your product should be used, inspiring people to use it, but building a platform that is extensible enough and it is got the right kind of abstract components that people can take it in different places that maybe you wouldn't have expected. And it's kind of this back and forth, this dance where like you inspire the community and then the community pushes you and you adapt to them. And with services and experiences, people were asking for them. So then we took a giant leap and we've launched all these new services, including things that like hair, makeup, nails, where I don't think a ton of people were asking for it. But we noticed a lot of people were like using Airbnb for weddings and special occasions. Definitely. And we assumed, people would want to get ready before they go out. And then maybe a bunch of people are staying at a home and like this one person come and do everyone's hair before they go out. And now that's probably going to lead to other types of services. Like now people are like, oh, can you get like a stylist or this or that? And there's just so many services out there. There's such a long tail of services. And there's not an easy way to find any of these. So hopefully this can really solve a major user problem. And the economy for services, now whether or not they're big on Airbnb is a question. That's a leap of faith. We don't know how big they'll be. But we know the total addressable market for services is a lot bigger than the total addressable market for short-term stays. And so the question is, how much of that market can we get? And it really comes down to some other fundamental problem, which is like, well, how big of a user problem do we solve? Do we add enough value for people to use it? And is it really easy? Are they really high quality? Is it a benefit that everything is one place is it a benefit that it's integrated, that you can like get a house and a chef, but then if you have to cancel a reservation, call customer service and you deal with one customer service agent for everything. It can all be connected on your itinerary. It's one platform. Like you can share your itinerary with other people and they get everything on the itinerary. Like there's a whole bunch of reasons why it makes sense for one company to do everything, whether you call it a super app or just, now you can be like, we have the tagline we launched last week, service experiences. And our tagline was, now you can Airbnb more than Airbnb, because Airbnb is a noun and a verb. And for most people, or for many people, it means like a house, a place to stay. But that is the ultimate indication of success, that you can like kind of redefine something that's entered the lexicon.
I love it. I mean, I think it's very smart. It makes a lot of sense. The question I'm asking myself is why are you kind of at your maximum on the housing? I mean, from a French perspective, it feels like you're not going to double, in France. I don't know what's your idea about that, but it's probably a tough market. I've heard that. Well, I'll tell you about my friend Yankel, who he's got 30 apartments. It's been one of your how do you say professional hosts for 10 years. He's going to go up to 40 this year. I called him this morning. So why do you do that? Is it because it's a new way to grow?
It is a new way to grow, but Airbnb could be much more than double the size for our core business.
In France?
Possibly. Probably. I mean, first of all, most of our business is in only 5 countries. So we're in 220 countries and regions.
So US, UK, France,
Australia, and Canada.
Australia and Canada.
Yeah. So basically the English...
Not like Germany.
Not up there. Not as big. So basically it's the four major English-speaking countries of, US, UK, Australia, Canada, those 4 major countries, plus France, which is kind of anomalous in that sense. And it's number 2. But like we're very small in Japan, we're small in Korea, we're emerging in Italy, Spain, and Germany. Like you just go around the world.
All right.
So first of all, like Airbnb could be significant. If Airbnb just became as popular in other major countries as France, we'd be way bigger. That's the first thing.
And what about those countries? Sorry, one moment. But those countries, what happens? I mean, you have competitors, or is it just they're not used to?
There are competitors, but like again, Airbnb is mostly a global network effect. It's different than Uber.
Okay.
If you want to get an Uber, you're usually getting it in your own city. So the drivers are in Paris and the riders are mostly in Paris. Now, sometimes travelers come in the city, but it's mostly what we would call a local network. Airbnb is a global network in the sense that usually, some occasionally people book Airbnbs in their own city if they're like renovating their home or they're booking Airbnb for their family visiting. But usually you're booking Airbnb in a place you don't live. And so supply and demand is in different markets and often different countries. We have a fair amount of business that's cross-border. As you can imagine, of the 700,000 people who stayed in Airbnbs in Paris, the majority of them came from other countries. So that's a global network effect. So there's a lot, like just to finish answer your question.
Yeah.
Our core business could be easily 2-3 times bigger. And we did $80 billion in bookings last year. I think people spent, if I'm not mistaken, people spent as much money on Airbnb as the LVMH group, the total group. I think they had their global gross sales were 80 billion, if I'm not mistaken. Like in customers, that 80 billion is not a revenue, but that's what people spend. We take a transaction fee. So it's pretty big, but it can be 2-3 times bigger.
Compared to like the big hotel companies like Accor or like all of these?
It's much larger than any hotel chain. So while Airbnb is much smaller than the whole hotel industry, the whole hotel industry is like 9 times the number of guests, even greater by revenue. Airbnb is bigger than any single hotel chain, and there's probably obvious reasons why. We don't have to pour concrete, and so it's a network, and people join the network. And the vast majority of people come to Airbnb. We don't even recruit to come to Airbnb. It comes from word of mouth. People make money. They tell other people.
80 people in Paris. That's what they told me. This is so small.
Yeah.
I mean, the team is, that I was amazed by the number. Yeah.
And that's for the whole country. Amazing. Not for Paris.
Yeah, that's like not even a big hotel has probably 500 people.
Yeah, and so like the Paris team is managing France, not just Paris. Yeah. And Airbnb's in 23,000 towns in villages and cities all over France. So one way Airbnb grows is we just grow in these other countries other than the 5. Another way Airbnb grows is we grow outside of the big cities. So even if we don't get a lot bigger in Paris, and we probably could, we could grow in all these small communities. Another way we could grow is to move up market to Lux. And maybe we don't double the number of guests by going to Lux, but that's where a lot of the profit is.
Yeah.
We also can go into long-term stays. We've basically built the platform to book a home for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. It works equally well, and we have lower transaction fees. And so Airbnb works that way. And we want to keep getting more regular people to put their homes in Airbnb. So we're working on doing more and more trust and safety checks and vetting of guests to make people more comfortable putting their homes up. So the answer to your question, there are a lot of ways to grow our core business, but services and experiences is a new chapter. And I think it can be a new revenue stream. I also think a whole bunch of people that don't book Airbnbs because they don't come with services will book Airbnbs because they come with services. So basically, it's three things. It gets people that aren't booking Airbnbs to book Airbnbs because they have services. It gets people who are booking Airbnbs to get a greater share of their wallet. And number three, you can use it without a home.
Yeah.
So there's really three ways you can make money on, say, services, and experiences are kind of the same thing.
I think I would definitely use the chef and probably haircuts and stuff like this in Paris here. Actually.
There you go.
Yeah. Definitely. I would probably use even more Airbnb than I use it now. So that's
kind of a cool thing because one of the challenges we have that Uber doesn't have, or Uber Eats, DoorDash doesn't have, and certainly Instagram or those apps don't have, is Airbnb is an app you use just a couple times a year. I mean, it depends on how often you travel. Some people travel all the time and they use Airbnb all the time.
Unless you're a host.
Very good. Yeah, and hosts will use it kind of every day.
I do delete the Airbnb app once, now and then, because I know if I don't use it, I don't need it.
Yeah.
And then I would reinstall it later.
Yeah, and so I would love for Airbnb just to be an app that is just a more regular part of people's lives. And to be a more regular part of people's lives, then, you got to be used beyond travel because, we can inspire people to travel a little bit more. We can get a greater percent of their trips. But yeah.
Interesting. So we talked about service. Let's talk about experience.
Yeah.
So you talked earlier on about the Olympic Games. Actually, I'll be next week. You don't care about soccer. I tried with your team, but you don't care about soccer. But Paris Saint-Germain will be next week playing in Munich.
Nice.
And actually, so I didn't take the Airbnb option, and I was like, I'm going to go to a crappy hotel with my daughter to watch the finals.
Yeah,
and I should have done, but actually, I'm interested into getting your opinion. I'll be there for probably like 15 hours in Munich.
When are you going?
It's a Saturday night, and then I'll go to the game.
I'm actually going to Berlin Sunday night.
Yeah. Okay. And it's going to be the next week, but I'll be there for like 15 hours. So I thought I should just go in and out in a hotel, not an Airbnb, because it would be probably too complicated. I don't know. Do you reckon it's a good idea, bad idea?
I mean, I think the longer the stay, the more it makes sense to book an Airbnb. So if you're only in a city for like 16 or 18 hours, hotels are a pretty good use case. I think you can use an Airbnb, and a lot of Airbnbs are pretty plug and play. The host allows it to be like there's door codes or like seamless check-in. You can now check in like kind of any hour of the day. You can check in, check out. But I think hotels and Airbnbs are kind of like different use cases. So there's a little bit of a debate, like what's better, Airbnb or hotel, and like they're kind of pitted against each other. I think the best way to think about it is there are reasons to use a hotel and there are reasons to use an Airbnb. It depends on the use case. If you are traveling by yourself, if you're traveling and you get in at midnight, you leave at like 8 a.m., you're in and out. You need everything like plug and play, taken care of. You're traveling for business and you need to be in the facility where there's like a conference. I think hotels are the best use case. I think Airbnbs, there's like three like really big obvious reasons you'd use them. First is if you're traveling with your family or a group. Mark Cavendish told us that, he's got a wife, he's got 5 kids, and the problem with traveling with his kids and staying hotels is you can't put 5 kids with your partner in a room. I mean, you can, but that's pretty miserable, and I don't think anyone's going to be happy unless you have like a massive penthouse. So you end up getting many rooms, but then that's actually a lot of money. And this is, by the way, the same with group travel. But also, like, there's no easy way to meet up. You got to go all the way down to the lobby, and it's just not really comfortable, and you can't have your own space. You don't really have a kitchen to sit around or a backyard or a fire pit or like a living room. So that's one obvious reason to stay Airbnb. The second is length of stay. If you're trying to only stay somewhere for a night, typically a hotel is probably the way to go. You can stay in Airbnb. If you're staying somewhere for 2-3 nights, you're kind of have an option to stay Airbnb or hotel. If you're staying somewhere like 4 or 5 nights or longer, almost always Airbnb is a better option. the longer you're away from home, kind of the more you want to be in a home. And it becomes pretty cost prohibitive to stay in a hotel for that long. And the other reason to use Airbnb is if you're traveling somewhere there aren't hotels.
Yeah.
And again, this is a key stat. In France, Airbnbs are in 23,000 towns and cities and villages. Hotels are in, I think, like 5,000 towns, cities, villages. That means that there's approximately 18,000 towns or city or villages that have Airbnbs but don't have hotels. An example would be the route of the Tour de France. We just did a part of the Tour de France. And you go on that route. I mean, I don't know a lot about it, but it's not only cutting through cities. It's cutting through like towns and more rural communities. There's homes across that route. There aren't hotels all along that route. So if you want to stay along the route of the Tour de France, or you see it on TV and you're like, oh, that looks like a really cool area, you got to stay in a home. And so these are three of the obvious reasons why you stay in Airbnb.
Plus when you're in the Olympic Games, you don't have enough facilities. So
that's
it's
a fourth
the same
reason.
Yeah.
That's a fourth reason, is that like for the Olympics, 700,000 people stayed in homes. If Airbnb didn't exist, those 700,000 people wouldn't have stayed in hotels because the hotels were already sold out. So those people probably would not have gone to the Olympics, or they would have maybe I guess they could have stayed in a hotel on the far perimeter, like outside of Paris, and commuted, but that would have been expensive and also inconvenient. So that's another problem. And actually, we started Airbnb to provide housing for events. In other words, Airbnb started to solve a problem for two sides. The problem for the host was during the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, people needed to make extra money. They desperately needed to make extra money and pay for their housing cost. The problem for guests was events were coming to town, all the hotels were sold out or really expensive, and people didn't have places to stay. So we kind of started by solving a problem. And I think there's a lesson there for entrepreneurs, which is to solve, obviously, like really clear, even if they're narrow user problems. Now, the market for people needing housing for events is a good sized market, but it's not like it's not a multi-billion-dollar company, but that's okay. I think there's a lot of obsession with entrepreneurs chasing really large markets. And I think great companies can often create a market. They don't just enter a large market.
But I think the events is a great thing, though, for you, because the number of people, including people, listener from La Martingale last year, but plus all of my friends who've made it into Airbnb because of the Olympic Games.
Yeah.
Everybody thought that it is going to be the gold mine, which it was at some point, actually. And now they still rent.
Yeah.
So I believe you grew the number of people, of hosts. But let me ask you a question about that. Who's your client? My friend Yankel, I was talking about, with his 30 places for rent, tells me he was a bit frustrated because he told me, sometimes we have problems like guests coming in, and they do, I don't know how big is that on Airbnb, but they do what he called reviews extortion, or reviews, they're trying to bargain on reviews and tell you, if you don't give me a price, or if you don't do that, I'll give you a bad review. And he said, when we tried to get an arbitrage, you say, right, or a negotiation, he believed that Airbnb is always on the guest side. I believe maybe the guests believe the other way around.
Yeah.
I don't know. Who's your client? How do you deal with that?
They're guest and host. We serve both of them, and we serve them both equally. It is actually really funny you say that, because I think there's sometimes a perception of host that we're too guest friendly, and then you ask the guests and they say we're too host friendly. So I think people will often perceive, an imbalance, and I think that's just the way kind of sometimes things are in life. We try to be fair. We try to adjudicate, and oftentimes we will, side with both sides, in the sense that sometimes we decide one reservation we decide with the guests, one reservation we decide with the hosts. Sometimes we'll side with both and pay the host while we're funding the guest and eat the cost. And, we can't do that all the time, but we'll often do that. And that's one of the benefits of the platform, is that we ultimately can absorb some of the cost. And if you were to book outside of Airbnb, it's very property owner or completely host centric. And in the short run, this seems like it's good for hosts and bad for guests, in the sense that if there's not a global platform, then there's not a third-party review system. If you pay the host, they don't want to give you back your money. You can't get your money. You have no recourse. They have your money. You have to take them to like small claims court in a country you don't live in. And so that's not possible. Now, here's the reason why being neutral and not siding with the host is good for host, because that increases trust and it makes more people comfortable booking those homes, which creates more bookings and more demand for the host. So being too host friendly is ultimately, in the long run, can be bad for a host if it makes guests more reluctant to book and therefore drives down bookings. Being too host friendly means, of course, you're not customer friendly, and then that's a real problem. And being too guest friendly, of course, means that really good hosts feel like they're just like, just kind of like thankless service workers, and they don't want to keep hosting and they'll churn. So our job is to balance supply and demand, and you're rewarded by getting the balance right and by being fair. And if you start to become unfair or you tip to one side or the other, you develop a marketplace imbalance, and you're punished for that. So you're rewarded for being fair. You're rewarded for being balanced, and the marketplace wants to find a balance or equilibrium.
All right. The other thing interesting it told me that I didn't see coming was actually he told me about one of your competitors, Booking.com, which was like 5% of his rentals like 4 years ago. And he tells me it's now 40%. Is it just for France? Or I was amazed because I would never rent.
I think Airbnb still got like 2/3 market share, like more than twice the market share of
it's for professionals only, right? On Booking.
It's much more for professionals.
Right.
And I think they've really targeted professionals because professionals are a little bit closer to hotel inventory. Right. They're more likely to have dedicated rentals. They're larger accounts. They have account managers. So yeah, they have more service departments, more like hotel-like inventory. We're more, I think we're Booking and Airbnb are both taking, share from the hotels, but even the hotels are doing better than they used to do. So it's kind of marginal.
Like the taxi drivers.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, this is actually this is an unknown fact, but hotels in some cities do try to prevent or regulate Airbnbs. But what people don't always realize is they also often try to prevent the creation of new hotels. So I don't know if that's obvious to people.
No.
So hotels aren't just trying to sometimes stop Airbnbs, they're trying to stop other hotels. In other words, you realize why are prices in Paris for hotels up 70%? It's because there's scarcity. There's more people that want the product than the product exists. If you have a hotel in Paris and a lot of Airbnbs come on the market, it doesn't mean that you're not going to fill your hotel, but you might not be able to charge as much. That's also true of hotels. If a hotel is built down the street, the same exact phenomenon would happen. And in fact, the creation of a new hotel would threaten a hotel more than Airbnb, probably because it's more like for like use case. Some people, like the example you say, come in at midnight, leave at in the morning. Some of those people would never have stayed in Airbnb, but they'd stay in a competitive hotel. And so there's always two sides. Or even take affordable housing. There's not an abundance of evidence that Airbnb is driving up housing in cities. And the example is the city of New York banned Airbnb and housing prices did not go down. They actually accelerated, went up. And of course, hotel prices went up even more. So that was a pretty abundant example of what happens.
Is it still the case, or did
we're still not there for short-term stays, and housing prices continue to rise. The alternative point is when home prices go up, people do benefit, and the people that benefit are homeowners. And so I guess the point is these things are complicated, interdependent ecosystems. And and it's like the narratives are simple. The economic dynamics of these markets are usually a bit more complex. And these are just some of the examples.
The thing you just said about short-term stays, and you talked about, how could we call them, mid-term stay? Like average stay term, I don't know, is another hack, I understood, at least in France and in Paris.
Oh, it's huge. It's almost 20% of our business by nights.
And it's
like 17%.
20%, and it's out of regulations still. I mean, at least in Paris, you can rent as much as you want.
Yeah, typically a short-term stay or a quote Airbnb is typically 30 days or less. Like it depends on the market.
Per year.
Yeah.
No,
not per year, per stay.
Okay, yeah.
Per stay. The basic idea is, at what point is someone a local looking for housing as a resident, and somebody looking for housing and they're transient? And if you stay for less than 30 days, two things happen typically. Number one, you typically have to pay like some type of hotel tax or like a VAT tax, like a hotel tax. The second thing is you have to comply with local laws and registrations that often, regulate short-term stays and or hotels. If it's longer than 30 days, then it's typically regulated like a long-term housing. And most cities don't have like a rule for stays between a month and a year.
Plus a big lack of opportunities of rooms and places to stay on midterm, no?
Yeah, there's quite a lot on Airbnb, but it's a big unsolved problem. If you basically, like, let's imagine you live in a small town in somewhere in France, and you want to come to Paris for the summer, or you get a job and you move to a city, and you're looking for permanent housing, but you need a place to stay for a while, or your home is being renovated. We can think of like a whole bunch of examples why, or you just don't want to sign a lease, or you're hopping around, or you're going to go here for a few months. There's a whole bunch of reasons why someone would want to rent by the month or by the season. Or you live in Paris, but you want to go stay with your family somewhere for the summer. So now you're getting a 3-month rental. How do you do that? What site do you go to? And if you want to stay somewhere for 3 nights, you can stay in an Airbnb or a hotel. If you want to stay somewhere for 3 months, you're not going to stay in a hotel. And so there really aren't a lot of other options. You can use like a rental broker or a classified site. But now you have many of the problems you had before Airbnb. You're sending your money to somebody. There's no third-party like platform adjudicating. You don't have a system of trust. Often the platform makes it hard to book. You don't know what you're getting. If there's a problem, you don't have great customer service. There's not alternatives. You're kind of in a bind. Like there's a whole bunch of issues. And frankly, there's not really even marketplaces. If I was in Paris and I needed to go to London for 3 months and I needed a place to stay, where do I go? And so this is kind of an unsolved problem. And then you ask, well, how big is this use case? Well, it's big and getting bigger. And I think post-pandemic, it's surging. And the reason why is because what the pandemic did is it untethered a lot of people from going to an office. Suddenly, you could do your job from a laptop. Now, a whole bunch of people go back to the office. But we can never unsee the fact that a lot of people's jobs can be done by a laptop, and you can take your laptop anywhere. And so there's more flexibility. As there's more flexibility, more and more people are looking to stay longer and longer. And that's basically a trend in Airbnb. And I'm pretty excited about this. You can call it longer term stays or medium length stays, monthly
amazing.
Seasonal rentals.
Brian, it's amazing. I mean, I was kind of, not worrying for you, definitely not, but thinking that you might be at your maximum. But I probably have a French bias here because, as you say, there are so many places. I mean, the length of the rentals, the geography, the new countries, the services, new events, the Tour de France, the Olympics. You're still a partner with the Olympics?
Yeah, we're still a partner with Olympics. I'm going to Milan. I think it's next week because I'm on kind of a world tour. I'm going to Berlin, then Milan. And
I'll be in Venezia.
There you go. Yeah, and so obviously Milan is hosting the next Winter Olympics in Milan and Cortina. And then the Summer Olympics is coming to Los Angeles, 2028. Our 2 biggest cities in the world are LA and Paris. Having back-to-back Summer Olympics in both cities is going to be incredible. we house 700,000 people in Paris Olympics. I'm sure we'll house, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people in LA.
What's the deal with those guys? I mean,
Which guys?
Like Tour de France or Olympics, you pay them, and they give you exposure. They rent some rooms for their athletes or their official. What's the idea?
So we're the official sponsor for a title sponsor for the Olympics and Tour de France. What that means is, number one, we can use their brand. So we can use the Tour de France brand. We can use the Olympic brand. Number two, it provides a certain amount of legitimacy. And these are extremely trusted brands around the world. And it's definitely in France. They often will promote, we just did a joint press conference, but they'll often promote to their own community. Then we can do special integrations, like experiences with their athletes. They'll help. We'll provide housing for people in the network. So there's a lot of things we do, but it's pretty much like a co-branded opportunity.
Fantastic.
And we do a lot of the heavy lifting to sign up people.
Great. Yeah, I'm so amazed. It's so many things, Brian. I want to talk before you go about those things you've been talking a lot. I know so many things you've been talking about, the way you started Airbnb, but also this founder mode versus manager mode last year, and the way you lead the people at Airbnb, the way you get that vision. Like who decides to launch those experiences? Is that you? Is that a gut feeling? How does that happen? What's the
all major decisions at Airbnb are usually group decisions, and I'll give the go ahead. But most of the ideas at Airbnb are not my ideas. Actually, here's an interesting thing. Most ideas at Airbnb are not my ideas, but most ideas at Airbnb I'm involved in because I'm in the flow of ideas. And I've always tried to, I remember one time I had an executive, in this kind of described manager mode, they said, is this your decision or is this my decision? They want to know what their decision-making authority is. I think I remember telling them something like, it really shouldn't be either of our decisions. There should be both of our decisions. We should be making these decisions together because you have some information and I have some information, and together we can make better decisions than apart. And this is, of course, pretty obvious in our company because we're a functional organization. So a lot of companies, every startup is run the same way. There's a few founders, typically, and between a few people, they do every job. And then they start getting specialists. And specialists are by function. You get a head of engineering, you get a head of design, you get a product management, marketing, sales, finance, legal. And so you build a functional organization, and everyone's working on everything, and information's perfect, or it's perfectly flows through the organization because it's small. You can move quickly, and the organization of a startup is a pretty solved problem. Then you grow. And then suddenly what happens is the company gets so big that then you've got a lot of teams that need support from engineering. A lot of teams need support of finance. A lot of teams need support of marketing. And so the functions start almost like a deli or something, or like a cafe, like a bakery where there's lines around the block and they have all these requests. So then what happens is the teams say, let me hire my own people and let me create my own little startup and I can go faster.
I get my own engineering team, my own marketing team. Okay.
And whether or not you manage them or they're dedicated, you kind of create your own teams and you start going in different directions. And you start dividing the company up. There's a literal name for it. It's called a divisional structure. You quite literally divide the company. And what happens is, a number of things happen. The first thing that happens is companies start going, the company starts going in different directions. There's not one unified direction for the company. You create these miniature CEOs or general managers. They often hire people in their own image. So they're almost like these mini people, in the likeness. It's almost like Russian babushka dolls. You take the doll out and there's a little doll and a little doll.
Different cultures, different,
The CEO starts getting separate from the product. They start getting separated from the strategy. And the CEO is often a product person or an engineer, the founder, but they're no longer doing what they're best at. And so they're no longer the chief product officer. Each division, this is how I got here. Each division has to ask for resources. Whoever asks the resource most effectively gets the resources. So this creates politics. Then there's a huge amount of bureaucracy because now, like, like there's a lot of dependencies. So even though you divide the company, it's still usually one company. You have to like leverage the brand, or you have to like fit the brand standards. You have to, the technology might have to be in one stack, or it has to all fit together, or like certain things start colliding. So the company actually initially can move a lot faster because it goes in different directions. But eventually it slows down. It gets more incremental. There's less accountability. There's often more politics and bureaucracy. And the basic principle of founder mode is there's a reaction against this.
So you can avoid that.
It can be avoided. And basically the idea is for the CEO, the leader of the company, it's just a few principles. I mean, there's a whole lot of principles, but a few important ones. Number one being the details. I was always told like great leadership is hiring great people and trusting them and getting out of their way to do their job. There's a big problem with that, though. First of all, how do you know if they're good? And how do you know until it's too late if they're not good? And after they've already hired a team and then they're not good, you have to replace them. But you also, what do you have to do? Replace their whole team and change the direction. And it can take years to get the team on course. And then, there's a lack of accountability. There's uneven standards. Costs rise. You end up having duplication. A lot of people start building the same thing in parallel. You're not putting the weight of the company behind something. And so the first principle is to be in the details. All startups are in being in the details. Be in the details. Now people say, well, be in the details is going to be micromanagement. Good people don't want to work for you. Well, being in the details doesn't mean you have to tell people to do. Being in the details just means you're aware of everything going on. And ideally, you're adding value. You're in the details, helping people make decisions, and that working together, you basically work through problems together. And that's what I do.
Sorry. Go ahead.
The second principle is getting people to basically row in one direction. A lot of people think a strategy is like to grow. Growing is not a strategy. Like hitting a metric's not a strategy. Hitting a metric or growing is maybe an indication a strategy is working, but it's not a unified strategy. So we basically try to have as few employees as possible, be as many of the details as possible, row in one direction. And the CEO should essentially be like the chief product officer if they can. That is their natural skill set. They're probably the people that helped build or create the product in the first place. And you're just really close to the problem. You're really close to the product. And I think this creates a culture where you can actually move faster. People assume being the details slows teams down, but you're assuming that like the only thing a leader does when they get involved is slow things down. They can actually speed things up. They can push the team to go harder, to go faster. They can block decision making. They can get teams to collaborate that are blocked. A lot of times teams have to get other teams to agree. They don't want to agree. They require consensus. Consensus is slow.
I understand that 100%.
So basically the core principle of founder mode, I guess, at the highest level, is to run a big company the way you run a small company. And so how do you run a large company in a way that gets the benefit of being a startup? How do you remain a startup as you grow? And the thing is, you can't do everything exactly the same, but you don't have to lose your soul, your spirit. You don't have to get completely detached from your product. You don't have to become professionally managed. And so Paul Graham, not I, coined founder mode. And he basically realized like founders have one mode of operating, which is they're in the details. They're like involved in the product. They're super integrated and they're running the company. They're actively running the company. They're not managing the company. They're building the company. A founder is building. It's kind of builder mode.
It's interesting. It reminds me of Stanislas Neufchâteau, the guy from in France who have this big company called Doctolib. That's where you will book your doctors and everything, and it's worth like between 5 and 10 billion. Wow. It's rather big, and it became back. I mean, it chose to go back to CPO. So, are you Airbnb CPO chief product officer?
Yeah, I definitely am. I have like a head of product, but I do consider myself the chief product officer of the company. And I generally think when possible, the CEO should be the chief product officer of the company. I mean, think about it. The most important thing a company does is make the product. So therefore,
And that works for a hotel owner. If
I think like sometimes
it's
the
just,
CEO.
it's not just for digital.
I think this is true for nearly every person, every company. Well, I guess it depends on what the most important thing is at the company. If the most important thing at a company is the quality of the product, then the most important responsibility for the CEO is to be responsible for making sure that product is great. Therefore, you would conclude that the most important competency of the CEO is to know how to basically assemble a team and manage a team to create great products. If you're at a company where the CEO comes from finance, then what you're saying implicitly is the most important thing is probably not the product, or if it is, they're probably not able to add a ton of value to the product.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, I don't know, if you're a car manufacturer, you're the CEO of Ford. Are you a CPO also, or can you be, or should you be? It's interesting.
I think are you? Probably not. Should you be? I think, well, I mean, look at like the market, look at over the last 15 years, how much faster Tesla has grown than the traditional car manufacturers because the CEO was the chief product officer. Now, there's a lot of other dimensions to that whole line, but yeah, I think it's really important that the CEO makes sure that the purpose of I mean, it actually goes back to a bigger question. What is the purpose of a company? Is the purpose of a company to make money, or is the purpose of a company to create a great product? You have to do both. Do you make a great product to make money, or do you make money to fund the creation of great products? Like, one is a means to the other.
Definitely.
I think most founders run a company whose ultimate purpose is to create great product. And they want to make a lot of money to be able to fund the development of more products. And of course, it doesn't mean we don't care about money. It's just, what do you wake up every day thinking about?
Money is gas.
And
right?
yeah, money is oxygen, money is gas. Most founders don't think about money all day. They think about building products. Professional managers that come from a more traditional background, not all the time, but sometimes flip it, sometimes. And they ultimately think they need to create a great product to ultimately make money to serve shareholders. And my argument, counterintuitively, is we're all serving shareholders in the end, eventually. But we're serving shareholders in different horizons. I think a founder is really trying to serve a shareholder over a long horizon. They just typically have longer horizons. Why? Because they're often going to stay at the company longer, and they're incentivized, and they have more moral authority. And so ultimately, therefore, I think the best thing for shareholders in the long run is that people love your company and they love your product. And so therefore, the most important thing you can focus on is creating great products in the long run.
But also you have to get people around you who love your company, your
yes.
employees. How do you make sure that the chief whatever officer works well with you, is not frustrated, working with you, Brian, telling him, that line or that thing is not the way you should do, or maybe we should do it that way. How do you make sure you don't get frustration, I believe it?
Well,
in the founder mode.
Yeah, and like founder mode can be frustrating, and it's not a license to tell everyone what to do all the time, especially if it makes the product worse and good people don't want to work for you. Number one, it's really important that you're really clear about how you want to run the company. I don't think people should apologize for how they want to run their company, assuming it's reasonable. But it's most important, number one, that you're clear and you're transparent with people how you run your company, so people have expectations. So you tell people, I'm going to be very much in the details. If people know what they're getting into, that's not for everyone. And some people are going to say, that's not for me. Others are going to say it's for them. I would argue for most people, it's a feature, not a bug, to have a very talented founder involved. And if you're joining the company, they're probably decently successful. Hence, they could afford to pay for you and employ you. And if they're successful, it's because the founder got something right. The second thing, though, is I think the founder needs to learn how to work with the team members. And I don't think you can just dictate unilaterally what to do to the team. Number one, the person working for you might be more of an expert at what they do than you. Number two, they might be closer to the problem than you. But that doesn't mean, therefore, you just have them do whatever they want to do, because they might not have the vision. They may not ultimately be the chief product officer of the company like you. And also, as a founder, You might have a different horizon. You have a different perspective. You probably have a lot more history. You have a deeper understanding of where everything comes from. But also, the benefit of a founder being involved is here's what people understand. If you leave people alone, but they have to collaborate, then it's actually harder, I think, to get peers to collaborate to make decisions than to just work with a founder who has total authority. And so ultimately, a founder has to partner. You're not telling people what to do. You're not just unilaterally do this, do this, do this, do this. You're also not just saying do whatever you want. You're in the details with them. You're having a conversation. And hopefully you're like brainstorming, you're going back and forth. Hopefully most of the time you're agreeing with the decision of your team, like 70, 80, 90%. If you're disagreeing more than that, then your team is probably not qualified or you're wrong. One of you is wrong, and that's a bad situation. But if the team is just running on their own and you add no value anytime, that's also probably a flag. So it's really this idea of partnering. You're making each other better. By the way, this is how co-founders work together. They may have their own lanes.
Definitely. Yeah.
They may have their own lanes and people have their own jobs, but they're partnering. If you're a CTO, you're a technical founder, and you're working with a non-technical founder. Maybe the non-technical founder is not telling them exactly how to code the product, how to build the product.
Yeah.
But they're definitely collaborating on what to build and why they're building it and how to integrate it and what the timelines are. And like they're collaborating on how many, they're collaborating every single day. They're literally partnering. And if two co-founders don't partner, the company is usually a disaster and implodes. And number one reason companies fail at some fundamental level is the inability of co-founders to work together. I mean, the other reason is you just do not find product market fit. But especially if a company fails with some product market fit, then it's definitely typically a collaboration issue.
Are your co-founders still around?
Yeah. They're both on the board. One of them is still involved in operating responsibility day to day. The other stepped back from day-to-day operations. I guess it was now 3 years ago, or I can't remember, or maybe a couple years ago. But this is really interesting. We basically have a standing weekly call. We're like a weekly Zoom now. We've been doing it just
the three
about
of you, or
the three of us.
Okay, still.
And we've been doing it, and I mean, we don't, we try to do it every week. There are weeks we don't get to it. Like this world tour, I'm not doing it because we're traveling and the time zones are crazy. But we've been doing that almost every single week since we started the company. There's a lesson there. The lesson is like, we're three co-founders that work together. No one sued each other. Like we're like really happy with each other. We have great relationships. And the question is, well, how is that possible? There's a whole bunch of reasons. Number one, I'm really lucky because I have like incredible co-founders that trust me. I trust them. But the other is that we invest in the relationship and we communicate a lot. And, there's this old saying, the absence of information is filled with dirt. A lot of collaboration and partnership problems are communication problems. It's a lack of communication. And then the lack of communication, people either assume the worst or they drift and go in different directions. And that drift creates a separation between the two people.
That's what you were explaining earlier on about the way you talk with cities, communities, local places you go to, right?
More communication is the key. More communication to your executives by being hands-on in the details. More communication with your founders. More communication with your stakeholders. And more communication with your board. People that often have trouble with their boards, board management, is often communication mismanagement. And it's often under communication with their board. Now, here's the problem. Here's the paradox. A lot of great founders are builders. And a lot of builders are introverts. And so this is the challenge for founder mode, is you want to be in the details, but not all founders are extroverts. A lot of them are introverts. And so this is something you have to push against. It doesn't mean you need to be extroverted, but you need to somehow communicate. Some people that are very introverted communicate a lot through like Slack and messaging. They read documents, they leave comments, they're constantly emailing, so there's many ways to communicate. Communication doesn't mean you're doing tons of public speaking all the time. It just means transferring information, but you need to transfer as much information as possible in companies usually. Or you literally design a company where it is quite literally subdivided. Subdivision of companies is very hard, though. And if you divide, it's better to either be totally integrated or totally separate apps, separate P&Ls, separate businesses, and you're kind of more of a holding company. The worst is this like kind of no man's land where they're separate but interdependent. And that's like a really tough situation.
So what I understand here is that Airbnb is a lot about communication. Would I say humanity, or at least, human things like interactions, and that's also your operations, right?
That's
what
really
you do.
good. That's a really good insight. Yeah,
and from host to guests and everything, and in a world that is like going AI everywhere, what's your take on that? I mean, is Airbnb going to become an AI company at some point? I know it's already for guests. My friend showed me amazing things you're doing, but
I think all software companies will be AI companies to some extent. Like, I think there's AI native companies, and a lot of startups. Like, I see I'm in the board of Y Combinator, so I see I see what the companies are that are entering Y Combinator. The vast majority of startups are AI companies. The vast majority, almost every single company is a so-called AI company. In 2012 or 2010, the vast majority of at least consumer companies had apps. And there were a whole bunch of companies before the App Store launched that didn't have an app. So there were companies that were like, Uber was an example of, Uber came out after the iPhone and they launched on only the iPhone. They only had an app, and then they had an Android app. They had no website, no desktop site. We launched before the App Store, or we launched before like with a website.
What's the percentage of
well, now
traffic
it's now like more like around 2/3 of our business are on applications, native applications. But eventually, just to answer a question about AI, almost like you'll have AI native companies, which are almost all companies started after the launch of ChatGPT. So starting around 2023, 2024, all go forward companies that are software companies, we're talking software, are basically AI companies, AI native companies. All companies started before are not AI native companies, but they're going to probably have to become AI companies to some extent. I think that we are in this unique phenomenon right now where, say, ChatGPT, OpenAI, is an AI app. And most other popular apps on your phone are either not AI apps, or they use a little bit of AI, but they're, including Airbnb, they're not fundamentally different. Within the next 2-3 years, that's going to change. And almost every app is going to be an AI app. Then AI will no longer be a novelty. And you won't have AI apps and non-AI apps. And that's going to lead to the change of every single app. And there's going to be this like thing where like AI apps are going to get broader and broader in use case, like ChatGPT and Gemini and other apps, Anthropic, are going to get broader and broader in use case. They're going to do more and more. At the same time, apps that aren't AI will become AI enabled. And so these two things are going to start to converge. That makes sense. And then there's this theory of, are we going to live in a world with more apps in the future or fewer apps? Are we going to live in a world where there's just a few AI apps and they do everything? Or are we going to live in a world where there's even more apps in the world? Nobody really knows. It's kind of the AI maximalist view, or like the AI enabling view. Probably there'll be more apps in the future. There were more apps in the iPhone than there were desktop apps before the iPhone. AI will probably enable the creation of endless number of apps. 1 or 2 or 3 people soon will be able to do the work of hundreds of people. So probably be a lot more apps. And they'll probably all be interoperable.
I have 2 questions about that on your business, on the way you're going to use it and what's going to change. The way I see it is like, as you can tell, I hate booking things. I hate booking planes. Yep. I hate booking hotels. I'm like it's kind of allergic to the thing, right?
Yep.
And I'm dreaming about, the moment I'll be able to have a super assistant that I will say, look, I'm going to Venezia, then I'm going to Munich, and then I'm going back to Paris,
yep.
and you just, what I like, just book everything. Do it for me, please. That's going to happen probably at some point.
Yes.
It's going to book my Airbnb. It's going to book. And then probably that super app, if it's not you, is going to ask hey, Brian, give me a cut on what I'll send you, right? It's going to happen. Is it something you're going to do, or?
I think that Airbnb is going to do a lot more than it does today. I think obviously we launched services, we launched experiences, and I think there's kind of a lot more extensions that we can do. I think the vision of Airbnb is there's a few changes that are going to happen. The first thing is we're going to become a platform beyond short-term stays, where you can get short-term stays, long-term stays, services, experiences, and then all the new things we're going to offer. They're mostly going to be related to traveling and living. So if you need to travel somewhere or live somewhere, we're going to build a community where you can travel and live anywhere. The second change is we're going to go from like traditional search, like that kind of pre-AI to post-generative AI, like every app. And that's not that differentiated. What's differentiated is hopefully the way we do it. We want to be, a leader in the application layer. I think one of the skill sets of the company is our ability to design really great user interfaces to make them delightful and simple. And we're going to really try to build this almost like concierge, like this travel and living concierge that understands you, learns about you, knows you, and can plan everything for you for traveling and living. The third change is we want to build a real community. And to build a real community, we really want to have much richer profiles. We want to build connections between people. When I announced Airbnb services and experiences last week, I also introduced a whole new app. And in the new app, we have a brand new profile. It's got this cool little identity card. It looks like a 3D ID. We have more than 200 million verified IDs. So every guest who books and every host has to verify their identity on Airbnb. We have 200 million verified identities. It's like pretty crazy. But that's just a gateway to where we go. And I think where we're going to go is to basically build kind of like the equivalent of a social network in the real world, where, it's basically a way to connect people in the real world. And so you can basically, what would you do? Well, initially, for experiences, you can see the other guests going on experiences. You can message people. This is all opt-in, but you can message people on experiences. You can keep in touch with them after. You can share photos and videos to reminisce. And I think the Airbnb product is just going to get a lot more social, a lot more about connection. So these are all the things. I think AI is going to enable all of this. And I think we should just think of AI like it's a really powerful general technology that is going to just make everything significantly smarter and more efficient. And it's also, pretty soon going to be doing a lot of software development.
Yeah, that was my next question, actually. I think it's Satya Nadella that said about 30% of the Microsoft code that was coded by AI. He said that last week. I don't know if you
and I think that's around where, I think that's kind of the benchmark. Maybe that's the upper bound of the benchmark of most companies. I don't know where we are, but there is a meaningful percentage of productivity lift from engineers. Will it lead to fewer engineers, or will engineers just be able to do more things? I don't know. I do think one consequence is the most common, computer programming is a language, right? You take an idea and you're translating ideas to a programming language, and AI is the ultimate translator. Just like AI can translate from English to Spanish, it can translate from English to a computer programming language. I think this is going to allow the creation of many more companies and many more applications. Like, suddenly, a non-technical founder or a company with very few technical people, if they know how to work with the AI tooling and prompts, could build a really sophisticated application.
100%.
And I think this means that a lot of the value is going to accrue to applications. And I think what that's going to lead to is a greater reliance on design and product. Now, AI can also do design, but I think it's going to lead to like a lot of what, chief product officers do. Like, you're going to be prompting. When you manage people, you're like having a conversation with somebody. AI is the same thing. You're going to have a conversation with somebody. And you're not unilaterally telling even AI what, like, you might see something and you get feedback. And you're like, okay, well, let's try this. And you get feedback. Let's try this. It's a conversation. And I think that's how it's going to be.
I was about to ask some data thing, but what's the data about Airbnb that you didn't expect, that fascinates you the most? I don't know. Do you have an idea, or I could put this?
there's so many things, but I'll just go to like something that stands out to me. Airbnb's been used like 2.5 billion times. So like 2.5 billion guest arrivals. So if you use Airbnb, that's an arrival. If you and your partner stay in Airbnb, that's kind of 2, right? That counts for 2. What I'm shocked about, or surprised about is how rarely something goes wrong, how often things work between strangers. When we started Airbnb, I remember many people saying, this idea is crazy. Strangers will never stay with those strangers. And this idea is never going to work because, bad things are going to happen. And people didn't have a good sense of proportion of the occurrence of unexpected and negative or unfortunate events. So after 2 billion guest arrivals, I've been asked, what have I learned about this? And I think what I've learned is people are fundamentally good, the vast majority of people. And people are also basically 99% the same. And if these two core truths were not true, we would have gone out of business a long time ago. I think Airbnb is just the celebration of the goodness of humanity. It is optimistic, possibly even naive. We were young and naive. Joe, Nate, and I, my co-founders, we didn't have evidence. Like, we didn't have statistical evidence that people were good. We just had an intuition. We trusted people, and we thought that if we gave tools to people to trust one another and we created the right incentives, you'd bring out the best in people. And if people weren't fundamentally good, the vast majority of the time, cities wouldn't exist and we wouldn't cooperate and we wouldn't get anything done. There wouldn't be a global economy, and you require cooperation. And one of the superpowers of our species is the ability to collaborate. And collaboration requires like trust. It requires good behavior. And of course, there's plenty of problems and conflicts and bad things that happen in the world. The important point is that is still a vast minority of human activity. And so the crazy stats are how great it is when strangers come in contact the vast majority of time, how good people are and how similar they are. I travel to cities all over the world. I don't have exactly the same conversation. I don't meet exactly the same people, but they're mostly the same. And we spend a lot of time in society talking about that 1% that makes us different. And some of those differences are great to celebrate. We call that diversity, culture. There's a reason France is different than Germany. We want to celebrate that. But as a part of the difference is when people think they're the other and we're tribal, or we become political, or we think others are different from us or less than us. And when we think people are different from us and we tend to trust them less and we don't collaborate and we assume the worst, then that is a bad thing. And I hope that Airbnb, a byproduct of it, is that people interact and have more faith in other people because of the experiences they have.
Brian, I'm being told that your chef is waiting for you in your flat nearby the Eiffel Tower. I have 3 more questions. You'll have to answer it very, very shortly.
Okay.
What do you love about your job?
I love that I have more energy today than I did the day I started. And the reason why is because I have a dream job, because I get to come to work every day with people that I love working with. And when you're the CEO and the founder, you get to pick the people you're with.
What do you hate about your job? What do you hate? Sorry. Hate.
I think anything that distracts from creating great products. There's a lot of complexity to running a large company. And I don't say I hate it, but anything that takes away from working with a team to create great products.
If you had one book you would give to everyone in the world, which one would it be?
Oh God, there's so many. When I started Airbnb, I was reading a biography about Walt Disney by an author named Neil Gabler. And he was one of my favorite entrepreneurs. He was kind of like Steve Jobs before Steve Jobs.
I didn't read that. Yeah.
And it's incredible. I think everyone knows Steve's story, but I think Walt Disney is like one of the great iconic founders of all time. And that story was a big inspiration for me starting Airbnb, because he had a saying, if you can dream it, you can do it. It's kind of fun to do the impossible. And I think those are wonderful principles for an entrepreneur to live by.
Have you ever read Magellan from Stefan Zweig? No? Have you heard about that? I'll offer. I'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Let me. Yeah, I will. And if you had the one thing you could tell to Brian when you were founding Airbnb, one thing you get the chance to meet yourself.
I would tell Brian, I know it's going to be hard, and at times you're going to lose faith, but failure is stopping, and just have faith and keep going because the best days of your life are ahead of you.
I'm so sad I didn't have enough time to talk more about failure because you've had a bunch of them, including the experience thing that you're relaunching right now. But I have so much faith into that product you described me. I'm going to be a huge client of this.
Well, I hope to one day be back and talk to you, and hopefully we can talk about the successes, but we'll also talk about the failures. And if I have no failure in the future, I'm not taking any risk, and then I'm not really an entrepreneur. And I hope to remain an entrepreneur, to take risks, that more things work than don't work. But I always want to be on the edge of the frontier, just really, flying close to the sun, but not burning up by the sun, and just trying to push ourselves beyond our comfort zone, because that is growth. You know what? And sometimes we'll fall down and we'll get each other back up, and we'll have each other's backs.
You know what, Brian? You won't come back. I will come to you in San Francisco. I will stay in an Airbnb.
Oh, thank you very much.
Will we make sure we get another one, an next episode?
Exactly.
It was a great moment.
Well, thank you so much.
I loved it. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
If it's the first time, we're going to dub this in French, actually.
Okay.
So you'll be in French with your own voice.
Okay, so let's do the whole thing in French.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. If it's the first time you listen to Génération Do It Yourself, we'll put you some former episode with some of the people you might know. We've met with the founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, or also the founder. I have to stop. Okay, I'll stop. Bye. I'll see you guys.